I challenge you to a fight. You are no match for my kung fu. Do you
Uh,
accept?
No, Monkey King, I do not.
That
With that, welcome to
is
this
right.
one.
You are no. Okay, fine.
Are you done, Monkey King? Are you done monkeying around?
Yes. Monkeying around. I see what you did there.
All right. With that, welcome to this month's episode of the 800s, coming to you a little late, normally September, but we're in early October. I am your co-host, Alex, and you just heard from my fleet of foot and tail and opposable thumbed hands, Monkey King Adam.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
thank you to the man behind the scenes, our very own Tripitaka, Alan. And I was like, how do I make a short name sound long like Tripitaka? Just hold the A. All right. With that, why don't we quick get into our plugs so we can start talking books, baby?
Sure thing. If you would like to know more about us, we are the DM's Table. Hit us up at dmstable.com and you can find out everything there is to know about us. One other thing, Patreon is how we decide what book to read next. So if you want to figure out what we are reading next before the end of the show, feel free to head over to our Patreon. The link should be below your video. We are DM's Table on Patreon as well. I think that's pretty much it for the plugs early section.
All right. So this month on the 800s, we will be discussing one of the quintessential works of Chinese mythology, Monkey King, Journey to the West. This translation by Wu Cheng'en. Born from a humble stone monkey becomes the king of monkeys of Flower Fruit Mountain by jumping through a waterfall first. He becomes a Taoist monk, gets named Sun Wukong, becomes immortal, enters heaven, steals a bunch of fruit that makes him somehow even more immortal, rebels against heaven, and gets stuck under a mountain for 500 years. And that's just the prologue. And then Monkey is joined by the Buddhist monk Tripitaka and has to make his journey to the West. What adventures will unfold?
Nobody knows. It's a total miss. Oh, wait, no. This book already came out. Everybody knows.
For a long time.
If this is your first time joining us tonight, let me lay down the expectations of how our show works. We are a discussion show. What that means is we are looking for a topic or question to discuss. Alex and myself will pose said topic or discussion, or topic or question for discussion. Sorry, skipped ahead in my talking there. And then we'll talk about our own viewpoints to give you guys in chat the opportunity to post your thoughts on it as well. And of course, if you have a question or topic to discuss, feel free to throw it in chat at any time. And when we're looking for the next thing to chat about, we will grab yours and throw it up for everyone to weigh in on. The show is much more fun with audience participation, so don't feel afraid to weigh in.
That's right, folks. And also, we're trying to create a fun and supportive community over here at DM's Table, where everyone can feel free to be as nerdy and excited about whatever they want without any fear of judgment or retribution. Also, bring kids around at your own discretion. We do cover some adult topics and situations and some swearing. And on that note, combine the two and be nice or fuck off.
With that, let's get right into the conversation. Let's start with our traditional first question. What were your initial thoughts of the Monkey King Journey to the West?
Well, my initial thoughts were that this book immediately has like a specific cadence, which is pretty common in like mythology that has been written down for many, many years is that it has a lot more poetry than prose to it. And I think part of that is a sign of like this comes from oral tradition, and it's a lot easier to memorize something that has like a cadence to it than something that is just completely free flowing. Um, it is definitely very different from a lot of what we consider to be like Western mythologies, like your Greeks and Viking and Egyptian, as a lot of this writing has a very particular energy to it. It's a lot more in your face than I was expecting, despite the fact that I know Monkey King is like the ultimate in your face character. And like, I knew that going in. Uh, so it was interesting to kind of like sit back and take in the style from the beginning. And that's usually kind of like a secondary note. And it was the one I found myself coming back to pretty frequently throughout, but it did hit me right from the beginning. What were your first impressions, Adam?
um, for me, I didn't know anything going into this book about what it was about or the mythology behind the Monkey King. Um, other than hearing of the Monkey King through various media productions,
Hmm.
um, but no real concrete. I know what the Monkey King is kind of stuff. So I was going in pretty raw to this book. Um, the style of this book is very unique compared to what we usually read. You definitely said it with in your face.
Hmm.
It's one of those books where it's like it's not afraid to be what it is. um, I did have a really hard time with the audiobook narrator, but I feel like a lot of that isn't the book's fault. It's just my own personal preference for narration. And, obviously being somebody whose primary form of book consumption is audio format, um, I tend to be a little bit picky about the narrators. So
Hmm.
I tried to keep that out of my mind while I was listening to this book, but it did play a factor in how I reacted to it.
Yeah, I quite honestly had a bit of the same issue, and I did spend some of my time trying to wonder like how much of this that feels off is that cadence of the book as it's written versus how it was spoken. This audiobook narrator like had a lot of in your face energy, which kind of played it worked for some things, but it didn't for others. And also it was hard to tell tone a lot of the time in the way that that part was done. And the problem with like trying to read this is that like the actual like written books have sections that are pretty different depending on what you read. Like there's not like a single standard for how it's written from what I saw. Like I only read like the first few pages of a couple different versions, and some called it like flower fruit mountain, some called it flowers and fruit mountain, some called it the mountain of flowers and fruit. And like it's little things like that, but like there's also whole bigger sections like the waterfall that he jumps through. And one of the translations that I read was he had to like actually like scale the waterfall or something like that. It was a much harder challenge compared to like what was there. And I didn't read far enough to see if there's anything like really big going on that was different, but I think that's kind of some of the fun of these mythologies is you get to see how various different people interpret it. I mean, it's nice to have like one to one, I know that these things are associated with this thing. But it's also kind of fun to see people like put the folk element, I guess, into it.
Yeah.
And I tried to embrace that when listening to this audiobook narrator, but also it was a bit distracting at times.
Yeah. I often found myself wondering, like, is the phrasing here a choice of translation, or is this like a verbatim translation of exactly how it was originally written? Not like in a whole, but like specific phrases. The
Oh yeah.
one that comes to mind is like cloud jumping. It's like, oh, is that like he's trying to translate something that means something else in the original language, or is that like in the original language they said, oh, he was cloud jumping from place to place, you know?
Well, you actually hit on what like the first question that I wanted to ask you is like, what did you think about the use of like idioms and metaphors in this um, writing?
uh Honestly, I found it surprisingly well done. And it's something that doesn't always play out very well when we're talking language barriers and culture barriers. um but there were definite moments where I was like, none come to mind right now, but where I was like, oh, that's a clever play on words. um I thought it was well done.
Uh, I thought it was an interesting mix of like kind of what you were saying, where there's some very modern uses of language in there. I can't remember the one off the top of my head either, but there was one where they basically uh, use something that is very colloquial to like American, which is like something along the lines of waiting on the other shoe to drop. I'm like, is
Yeah.
there an actual idiom in Chinese like language that translates directly to that, or do they have something similar and it got changed for like our audience? And then there are things like via Strake said, like, is this a Hercules situation where it was like, through translation did something end up something else? Or is there literally no translation? Like, uh, they have words that mean do they have like a single word that means the whole idiom?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But there were elements of where you could tell it was very much like this is the original because of how the wording was laid out. And I I think they did a good job of choosing when to shift that style so that I never felt like I didn't fully understand what how they were using it, how they were using the words, the idioms and the metaphors at any given point. So like it was very easy to understand, which is completely necessary because there's a lot of nonsensical there's a lot of like lore in here that I just did not know what they were referencing. And so if you had to parse through the idioms and metaphors and allegories and things like that as well, that would have been just so much harder to read.
Yeah.
But I thought it was done reasonably well. There were a couple that kind of stood out. I remember thinking like, did it need to be said with what sounds like a very, Eurocentric, like, could it have been said with more poeticism, or and that's where I started thinking about, well, maybe there just is supposed to be one word here, and to completely describe it, you would ruin the rhythm of the story. So
Right.
maybe.
Now, like Via Strake brought up, there was some metaphor at some point that was like four dragons in the hand is better than six in the bush.
Yeah,
It's very
that is actually exactly one of the ones I remember thinking that about was like one dragon in the hand is worth like six in the bush or something like that.
yeah. Then there was that moment where Monkey pretended to be Monkey's brothers or relatives, and just
Hmm.
it was his name backwards first, and then it was his name backwards for the first half, and then backwards for the second half, and stuff like that. It's
Yaknom.
kind of
Yeah.
interesting thinking, like, I wonder
Yeah.
what that was in the original text. Like, his was that monkey in the original text, and then they literally had monkey backwards, or
Or was it like flipped because this is, it's not like full symbology, but like Chinese characters are sounds, not like, and like a
yeah,
single character's word is like, is it flipped? Like, was it two and they flipped them like this, or was it one and they literally flipped it? you know,
yeah.
or both. It does get interesting, and that definitely piques my historical interest. But we're here to talk book, not only partially history because of the nature of this book. So did you have a question for our audience, Adam, or does the chat have
Yeah,
one? Otherwise, I don't want to go twice in a row.
yeah. So the plot of this story being the travel, the journey to the west,
Hmm.
as Tripanaka, or however you say his name,
Tripitaka.
and his Tripitaka, sorry, Tripitaka and his disciples um, face several challenges and finally make it to um, the west. How do you think that played out as plot progression in the story? Do you think it was a good plot? Do you think it had problems?
Um,
Do you think it was fantastic and you would have changed nothing?
I mean, it definitely has some issues, but trying to put it into context, it's very episodic. Everything moves, like the through line is Tripitaka, Monkey Pigsy, Sandy trying to make it from the Eastern Kingdom to the Western Kingdom to pick up these Buddhist scrolls so that they can spread the great wisdom of Buddhism to the East, to the Kingdom of China. Forget which dynasty was going on at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but it was there isn't really like a ton of character progression throughout it, so the plot hangs a lot on these little episodes having their own plot, and then it kind of at the end somehow gets them a little bit closer to where they were going or out of
Yeah.
the way. It plays a lot like the Odyssey, right? Um, Odysseus is making it, he makes it to an island and there's this going on. He uh he makes it through this challenge, but then is set back another, and has to go, it's all like leading to that destination. But yeah, it is what VS Drake was saying, is it is about the journey before the destination. In fact, like, what is it? Um, the Tripitaka, in order to become like a and like immortal bodhisattva, has to, or
Has
one
to
of the
face the 81
specifically
challenges or
9 by
whatever.
9 trials, and like it is about like what you overcome to get to your destination, and that is what I think is the plot of it. There's no there's not a lot of character progression plot. There's some where Monkey learns like a modicum of responsibility. Um, and but it's so minimal, and I think you kind of have to treat it like these little separate episodes in order to see a plot in it. I wish there would have been something more to it, but I also get that when you're telling these stories, you wouldn't tell them all one at a go. This would be probably told in these little sections over a period of many nights, or read in that way. And the complexity of it isn't there because, quite frankly, they didn't need it to be. A lot of it is, you know, it is what mythology is, and that's describing the world around you and these challenges that are universal but amped up to cosmic levels, and that's just what
Hmm.
they're about. And so I guess it feels less like a singular story and more like an anthology. And I can't put my finger on it, but a little bit more so than what I remember. And maybe it's because I'm more familiar with the world at large and the mythology at large for like Greek mythology, but like the Iliad and the Odyssey felt like there was a little more continuity in plot than this one did. This one just felt more erratic, but maybe that's just Monkey, you know. What about you?
For me, so I obviously, or I should say obviously, I picked up on like the episodic nature too. That was something I was going to bring up. Is it was very much like this thing happens, and then this thing, and then this thing, and then this thing, and then
Mhm.
this thing. Um, the problem I had with that nature here is nothing felt like growth along the story. It was just episode after episode. Um, there wasn't any sort of mini climaxes along the story. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, oh, these were small challenges leading up to this larger challenge that they managed to overcome, and then they moved on and had a couple of more smaller challenges that led up to this large challenge, and those two large challenges together allowed them to overcome this third challenge. There was nothing that like built on each other.
Yeah.
Like you said, Monkey did have some character growth where he started to be like, okay, I have things I can do other than just joke around all the time. The specific example I have that comes to mind is when they finally do get to India. Was it India? Yeah,
Yeah.
India. Um, they come across the village of people who are in a drought for 3 years and they're about to die. And at that moment, Monkey could have at any time just gone, well, see ya, sucks to be you.
Mhm.
But he chose to help them because he was there. And I think that showed great character growth on Monkey's part, where he was like, good things do kind of happen when I am not a dick to everyone I meet.
Yeah. I think you kind of put a finger on exactly what I felt wasn't quite right about this when you said that, like, very little builds on itself in this. There's but it kind of makes sense for the culture within the story too. Everything was about lists of feats, lists of accomplishments, lists of associations, things like that. And it felt like a checklist. Even at the end, when they don't have like that last trial, he's completed 80 of the 81. And the last trial is just like, here, we're gonna waylay you real quick. And it's just, we're gonna zap you here and then zap you back, and we're done, as long as don't fuck it up, kind of, in this.
Yeah.
So I think that is the bit, was like, there wasn't enough like breathing room for these accomplishments to have like a ton of weight without having the like specific cultural and mythological knowledge to know the weight of some of these accomplishments. You know, it was a little hard to tell, like, especially because Monkey King is like so broken most of the time, as like you know, it's like what are it didn't feel like there were enough stakes sometimes. That's I think what I'm getting at.
It's hard when you're already immortal to feel like there's peril.
Yeah, especially when he comes out of like being stuck under a mountain for 500 years, basically just being like, that was mean.
VS Drake says he thinks it's episodic. Character growth was solid. Monkey matures a lot. IMO. Gotta agree with that. I also think some of the plots fall into the classic story tropes, showing its classic roots. I felt a bit of love in the story, like these episodes were cherished.
Yeah, I can see that when you take them as like isolated stories. I'm not sure how much of this was full on Tinker Tanner, but anytime that there is like an oral tradition that leads to a written work, there is something added by any given storyteller. It might be something little, might be something big, it might be a full story just because they had that capability or wanted to teach a specific lesson that somebody needed to hear, like maybe a kid who was a little bit too much like Monkey. um, um, or God forbid like Pigsy.
I'm gonna go take a nap. No, now that I'm thinking about it, I do kind of agree that, um, maybe this book might have played out better in a different medium, something like a book of fables broken down that you
Mhm.
tell your child one a night kind of a deal.
Yeah, and I think some other works probably have done. Well, I know that there have been versions of it for like other types of mythology, and I'm sure there are. I mean, I saw that there were variations on how this was done in like the physical reading, and it would be interesting to see things like I know that there are plays based on Song Wukong. There are all kinds of movies out there about it as well, and I think it's kind of cool that there's enough going on in these that I think you could just pick the pieces that resonate with you and still get like a really cool story out of it, and you could choose what you want to build in that way, or you can keep it like this, which is probably, I would say, not the most academic, but like it falls somewhere between there and full entertainment. And I feel like this works best as full entertainment or full academic. And I think that was one of the minor shortcomings in this version of it, was it kind of fell in a place in between that wasn't the best for me. It wasn't bad, it was just not the best for me.
Hmm. Not all of the stories are in this book too. This was specifically curated, which makes the retelling modular.
Case in point, thanks for bringing that up, VS Drake. This is why we love the chat, because that is exactly what this feels like. Is this feels like somebody's take on this story, and there are parts that were really good and parts that didn't resonate with me, and it does make me curious, like why certain parts were chosen, why some might have been left out, and that's for us to guess at, and the author to know, or the curator to know. But I think we got a good idea at the very least from all of these of like who the characters were, hammered
Yeah,
in pretty solidly.
I think knowing that, it makes a lot of sense to say, like, um if you treat these like parables of the story instead of chapters of the story. Like, yeah, okay. It
Yeah,
might be more coherent to be like, it doesn't actually matter what order you tell this story, and it's more about just telling the short stories in it and knowing the overall arcing story as like a guideline of why the stories exist.
yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, there's certain things that you obviously can't put first. Like, you can't just be in India and then be just outside China. Like, there's a level of progression that needs to be there. You know, and I think a lot of this was like all of the stories surrounding Sun Wukong are just about talking about how their culture interacts with the wider world and how that works when there's also, you know, cosmic beings like involved in all of that. And that is the job of mythology, is to like find a way to come to terms with something about life in the context of things that are inherently able to stand up to these giant forces in the world. Uh, I'm not exactly sure how I want to like word this question, but I would like to talk about uh, the.
Topics are okay.
uh, I would like to talk about the
Aliens.
the mythology itself and what you thought about like um the structure of Chinese mythological characters, like
Yeah.
the hierarchies in heavens. Like,
Yeah, it so a lot of the times I felt like there were some things that I was meant to know as the reader or receiver of the story that I just didn't know.
yeah,
um
holy crap, preach.
I felt a lot of the times where it's like if I said, I enjoyed a tasty Mountain Dew and left it at that. And you were like, I've never heard of a fucking Mountain Dew before. Like, what is that? Is that some sort of nice water or what? Like,
Yeah. It's like, I survived 45 days and his pot of 8 trigrams. Like, like I know Buddha, and I've heard 8 trigrams before, but I have zero context for what that means beyond that. And there were a
yeah,
lot
I
of
think,
things where I think it's just assumed that you know certain things, and that I think was the thing that took me out of it the most. Sometimes is I had to be like, what does it mean that that happened? Like, is it just
yeah,
the other thing that threw me off? Did you notice how much that they were using very, very specific numbers?
in terms of like 81 or 9 by 9 and stuff.
Or the staff weighed 13,500 pounds and Monkey's soul number was 1,350.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was really interesting, like how like they just throw these numbers, and I'm like, does everybody know like what the significance of these numbers, or is it because they put those numbers in there that they became significant? Because I know numerology plays a huge part in um like traditional Eastern medicine and stuff. Uh and or yeah, cloud somersaulting can go 108,000 miles, which is a it's divisible by 9, and I know 9 and 3 are big numbers for Chinese. uh I know 4 is really bad. Um, that's about, but like it was kind of cool to see that. But also the other thing that intrigued me, and let me know if you saw this as well, was there's always hierarchy when it comes to like heavens and gods and things like that. But the level of bureaucracy in Chinese heaven was more human than I'm used to, you know? They're like, "Oh yes,
Yeah,
we'll make you a god once we sign to this paperwork."
had to do these exact jump through the hoops and agree to the stuff and stuff. Yeah, I agree. It was oddly controlled. Um, but no, I think that's speaking to the traditions of the religions at hand and laying a foundation for the importance of sticking to tradition.
Yeah, I like that interpretation. I mean, it is kind of the job of mythology is to like reassert these norms as being a part of the fabric of the universe and how they work. I just think it's interesting that Chinese thought bureaucracy was a part of the fabric of the universe. You know? Like, wow. Like right from the
Yeah.
beginning, man, the Jade Emperor was just like sign this in triplicate and get it stamped by all four of the guardian spirits of the north, south, east, and west. Um, oh yeah, it's absolutely rooted in nature. In particular, like they had their natural elements. I mean, it was the five elements mountain that was the one that finally pinned a monkey, you know, and theirs is earth. Sorry, theirs is water, fire, air, wood, and metal. And you know, it's absolutely based in nature because nature is are those forces that humans are faced with constantly, but is so much bigger than them, especially back then.
All right, what was your favorite story or chapter per vs Drake?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um,
You want me to go first?
yeah, please.
So I
If you
really
got one.
liked the India drought story, which I've already mentioned. I really liked the moment where Monkey did something that was to no benefit of him his own.
Mhm.
Um, and I really liked the story where he had to go get the fan to blow out the burning mountain.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and
mostly because those
go ahead.
that one felt like bigger where there was a lot of setup to it and a lot of things came into play like Monkey's transformation powers and the extent that he could take it, what other people could do with magic and stuff in terms of those other creatures that lived in the world. A lot of that came to play in that story, and I felt like it was a really good moment where the stories almost had a moment of peak where it was like stuff's coming together now. We're getting somewhere in the story. We're progressing.
Yeah,
That's
I
pretty much
agree.
all I
Those
have to say
were
about
yeah,
it.
no, those were great stories within this, and some of the ones that I was kind of parsing through myself. Another one of the ones that I was thinking of, V.S. Drake mentions is that their favorite is the story of how he got his staff. Um, I think the origin of the staff is interesting as being like this is the thing that measures the river that runs through heaven. Like measures its depth. It's a depth measuring stick, and he turns it into like the ultimate weapon, which I, you know, shows monkeys. creativity, even if he is a dick about it. It's probably why it's not my favorite though, is because that's like peak monkey entitlement right there. He's just like, "Hey, you live next door. Give me a weapon. I deserve one."
Yeah,
He's like,
totally.
or else I'll annoy the shit out of you." I was just surprised how compliant the river dragon was when he was just like, "I just want this guy to go away. Give him what he wants."
God is annoying. Get him the fuck out of here.
Just give him whatever. um, I like the one where he meets was it Red Boy? Like his the demon that he made the deal with when he was the before he was in prison for 500 years. Uh and he finally met somebody. I think that was for me the point where I thought Monkey kind of turned had to take a inward look a little bit, like beyond what the I forget the goddess's name who sent them on this, like the Buddha sent her to recruit, Tripitaka, Pigsy, Sandy, and Monkey King. I'm forgetting her name.
Yeah,
Um
I forget to.
but she kind of like she was like the essentially the closest thing that we get to like a through line character from the before to after. And in that story with until the red boy becomes a part of that story, he is a link to Monkey's past. The Monkey has to actually look inward for the first time since he was recruited by her. And I think that's where the character development actually starts coming in. It wasn't just a like, I'll do this until I get my freedom and then fuck them. But that was the first time where he actually met somebody who, while it didn't defeat him, like as in kill him, he was like
Shrugs.
solidly got the shit beat out of him. And he also had to take a look at like, hey, just because I knew somebody who knew somebody doesn't mean that I'm entitled to whatever the fuck I want from them. And he actually does start. That's I think where you start seeing more of the trickster element becoming cleverness, not just you know being a trickster. And
Yeah.
because I think what is it like? I really love the subtle element of like he can't get in to that one palace, so he becomes a gold handkerchief so that they'll walk him right in. Little thing, and before he probably would have just like slammed on the door, and I think it all started there, which is why it was like my favorite. My second favorite was probably the second one that you mentioned, Adam, as well. Um, that fan story really does have, I think, in and of itself, story beats more so than some of these other ones.
Yeah. Um, I think we've got time for one more topic if you've got something you wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, let's talk favorite and least favorite non-monkey characters.
Yeah, okay. Um,
You need me to start this one?
yeah, why don't you go?
All right. So I'll start with the one that I think is obviously I think I've already made it clear is my least favorite character. Uh, Pigsy can like not everybody needs to be the most brave or the most or whatever, but Pigsy was just a manipulative asshole like the whole way through. Like goddamn. And he came around just because he was fast and strong and technically immortal. Like
Technically, yeah, he's technically immortal.
he's like all of the entitlement of Monkey with none of the character progression and a lazy streak that is 108,000 cloud leaps long. Um, um, I think my favorite is kind of a tie because Red Boy is definitely one of them. I did enjoy him as a character, even though he was like realistically like he was kind of well he was a antagonist, but mm, yeah, the favorite, I hate saying this because I forget her name, but uh oh, Guanyin, I think is her name. I think, if I remember. I just liked her because she was just like the only one who was just like, listen, he just needs some guidance. He was born from with no parents on a out of a rock at the top of a mountain, and suddenly found himself in a king of monkeys and immortal. And she's like, he just needs to learn some damn lessons. Let's put him with the most pious motherfucker we can find. And lay some heavy consequences. And she, like, and yeah, I like that there is like a character out there that plays kind of like a nurturing presence for Monkey, which was kind of cool. And not just for Monkey, like I think that's kind of not entirely, but kind of in there, especially when most of the other characters are very clinical, very uh they're logical until they're mad, and then they're mad because of usually relatively minor slights to their pride, you know, which pretty typical for gods, but like I like that she was kind of this like lone voice of like calm and centeredness, which didn't come from a place of pure uh religious zealousy,
Yeah.
it was her nature, not her scripture. You have your
Via
slogan.
Strakas. Yeah, Via
Oh,
Strakas figured it out.
yeah, straight. What have you
Guanine.
figured out?
He's figured out the spelling of guanine.
Go on.
Guanine.
Awesome.
Anyway, the part I'm struggling with is what character I liked. Like, I didn't like Pugsley. He was
Pigsley.
very Pigsley, whatever. Sorry. The pig guy. I didn't like the pig guy. um, because he didn't change much. We didn't get a lot of screen time with the other two disciples. Obviously, one spent the entire time as a horse, so like, of course, he didn't get a ton of screen time. Uh,
Wait, that was actually
the
my favorite.
oth- well, too bad he didn't get screen time. He doesn't count. um, yeah, and then the other disciple was there and did things, but only when Pigsley was busy or captured.
Yeah.
So Tripitaka was okay. Like, he was cool. He was a little bit of a hypocrite most of the story, but other than that, he was cool. Because he was all like, "No violence, Monkey. I hate you for being violent." And then later in the story, he's like, "Monkey, go kill those fuckers over there. Like, they pissed me
But
off."
that was his character growth.
Yeah, character ungrowth.
Yeah, well, I think some of the journey was legitimately growth to realize that like
He didn't have to be
that
so
rigid.
strict
Yeah, he
and
didn't have to be so completely rigid. It's like that there were times when violence did have to be made. Like he learns that lesson when he basically tells Monkey to go away. Now that is because Pigsley's being a manipulative asshole. Um, and Monkey is being a instead of explaining anything, is just being indignant about it. But um, I think that plays out a lot like the boy that cried wolf. And Tripitaka, I think, realizes when he's finally captured by um, what's her face, uh, um, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like when he is captured and needs saving, I think he realizes like, oh, uh, what was it? It was those two. It was those two kings. I can't remember, like Red King and Blue King or something like that.
yeah,
Um,
right after he sent Monkey away, because he was all like, "I'm sick of you being so mean to people and stuff."
yeah, and then he realized like, oh, some people literally just want to kill and eat me, and self-defense is a thing. And he says he'd rather die, but then he realizes like, oh, it's not just dying. They want to torture me and eat me and ruin my immortal soul, and I can't let that happen.
All
Well,
right, what
Jim,
were
what do
your
you think
final
about
thoughts?
it? Final
Final
thoughts.
overall thoughts.
I thought it was. I'm really glad that we read this because I have a huge interest in mythology, and I think that this is anybody who's interested in mythology. It's great to open up your um, mind to like how this is structured in places you're maybe less familiar with. So if you haven't read this, I think it's and I can see why it's a quintessential work, and I think it's worth reading. Wasn't my favorite version of it from the audiobook specific. Sorry, hiccups. From the audiobook specifically, but um I think this as a story I would recommend. Just I wouldn't outright necessarily recommend this version of it. I
Yeah.
mean, um, so anybody who loves mythology, read it. Pick and choose which one you think fits for you, but read through the story. It's great.
Yeah. I enjoyed learning more about the Monkey King and the cultural impact that this story had. However, this is definitely not the medium for these stories, and I cannot recommend that anybody read this book in this format.
Oh,
Um, that to me, that's just my take.
I think
Um,
audiobook could work. Uh, just maybe a different one.
um, yeah, the audiobook was rough for this,
Mhm.
which definitely did not help its case. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
yes, scathing review for Adam. Yeah. Um, it had some good moments. It just is it's not a compelling novel. And I think that's the problem is it's presented in novel format here, and that's not the right format for this story.
Oh, that's what you mean by format. I thought you meant like specifically the audiobook. I'm like, audiobook could work, but I think it would just
Yeah.
need to be either curated in a different way because like you said, this version of it does not work well in a novelized form. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way to put it. But it does have some great moments. It has some great stories. I totally get why VS Drake wants to play the Wukong games. Probably a reason why it is so uh, you know, popular. I mean, when it first came out, I know it was breaking records. Because this is a popular story for a reason. Monkey starts out as a dick, but he's like a hard character to look away from because, hijinks. Um,
Yep.
all right.
All
So,
right.
with that, let's start getting into our wrap up game here.
Sure thing, sure thing. Our next meetup is that right? November 8th. We have
Uh,
NPCs by Drew Hayes.
you said November 8th.
October 25th. We have an October 25th.
I was going to
Sorry.
say, I thought we had one before Halloween, but in the same month.
Yep. All right. October 20. I apologize. I skipped right over October 25th.
How dare you?
I know. October 25th, Pen Pal by JT Gessinger. Is that how you say that? And then November 8th, NPCs by Drew Hayes. I have not read Pen Pal. I have read NPCs by Drew Hayes. Fantastic and hilarious alt take on that story. It's good. It's real good.
Oh, well, way to poison the waters. You've already set their minds on how good it's going to be. You're setting the expectations too high. Who knows?
If you don't like it, you're not welcome on the show. I'm just kidding. Please come anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, please, especially if you disagree. Honestly, some of our most fun experiences were when we disagreed with the people in the chat about a given point, or even sometimes a whole book. Uh, Apparently, Pen Pal is a little screwy, so reader beware. Duly noted. Uh,
Do we?
Coming up though, we do have our usual redemption arc in December. So those are going to be books that you voted on before that we did not uh, get around to, that were not successfully voted for. So they'll get three of them will get a second chance. And for New Year's, we are going to be doing a day of remembrance, day of reflection, as one does on the new year in January. And for that theme, we want to hear, what was your favorite book that you read outside of the 800s for the year? So you've got a little bit of time to think about that. We'll have our vote up for December shortly after this. Why don't you do our end of
Viewer
day plugs?
viewer discretion on Pen Pal from VS Drake. Trigger warnings. It has explicit language, graphic sex and power play dynamics, detailed descriptions of death and grief, miscarriage, domestic violence, and mental illness. This book apparently goes hard.
Yep.
It is considered a dark romance and has
Very dark
paranormal
from what I've
ties.
seen. All right. Still looking forward to reading it, though. I hope you guys join us. Adam, why don't you quite get into plugs? We can talk side pieces and then.
Sure thing. Remainder of the plugs. Yes, other plugs. As I said at the beginning of the show, dmstable.com is where you want to go to find out more about us. We also post all these videos on our YouTube channel, so please check it out. We are the DM's Table on YouTube as well. Link is below your video here. On YouTube, you can see these videos as well as any other videos we produced in the past. We did some D&D stuff, some book reviews, stuff like that. I personally prefer to listen to books instead of read them just because I feel like I have the opportunity to soak in more books that way. If you are the same way or would like to give it a shot, head over to Audible and get a free trial. Head to dmstable.com/audible to give us credit for leading you their way. Audible has a ton of books in their library, although I do feel inclined to note that purchasing books on Audible does not grant you legal rights over owning the book. It only gives you a license to listen to the book. That is some ongoing drama with Audible, but Fair warning, but
Yeah.
you do get to keep your license forever. You just have to use it through Audible.
Yes.
In Compotech, Fearless First was the music you heard during our pre show. If you thought it was cool and want to hear more like it, head over to incompetech.filmmusic.io and check out what else they have to offer. It's great for background music for many sorts of productions and creations. And of course, as I mentioned before, we have a Patreon. We are the DM's Table on Patreon. Feel free to click the link below your video to head over to our Patreon channel. If you want to hit us up on our socials, we do have Facebook and X. We are at the DM's Table on Facebook and at DM's Table on X. I think that's it.
I think so too. All right, so we'll very briefly do our side pieces for this past month. Um, I I know that I harped on this last time, but I fully finished the Dungeon Crawler Carl series up to book 7, which is currently out. Uh, cannot recommend it enough, especially the audiobook version, because the audiobook version for that one may have ruined me for others.
Oh my God.
But it is my favorite audiobook rendition of any book that I've ever listened to, and the actual book itself is worth getting as well. I know they're re-releasing with new covers and stuff, but the cover page for each of these has this own little side story on it that doesn't directly influence the main story, so you don't have to know what that is, but it does add some nice little flavor if you do decide that you just want to read the physical books. Um, Also, I guess shout out to Worlds Beyond Number because uh it's not reading, but damned if it isn't some of the best storytelling that I've ever listened to. Uh and you know, headed by some of the it's a real it's a TTRPG real play podcast that's run by Brandon Lee Mulligan, Bria Iyengar, Eric Ishii, and Lou Wilson. And damn does it slap. We are not paid by them to say this. I just like it that much. And, and the Dungeon Crawler books have taken up so much of my space outside of this because I'm, you guessed it, rereading.
Yeah, my side pieces also included Dungeon Crawler Carl. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
I got through the first 6 of 7 currently out books. Um,
Hurry up, because
I,
it's supposed to come out
you
soon.
know, I had the hardest time deciding to listen to Monkey King instead of the next Dungeon Crawler Carl book. But I knew I did not have time to do both, so I had to make a choice, and I chose Monkey King. Shout out to Jeff Hayes. Fantastic narration. Not only is his narration top notch, he does multiple voices very well. He puts feeling into not only the main character but side characters as well.
Mhm.
He's very consistent with his voices, and his editing is top notch. I'm assuming he does his own editing. That might not be true, but the editing of these books is fantastic. It brings new life to the story, in my opinion, to see the ways that um, either Jeff Hayes or Jeff Hayes's audio editor overlaid some sounds in the book or overlaid his own narration on top of his own narration. It was fantastically well done and an extremely enjoyable experience.
It is a full-on audio production company. I'm not sure how many employees there are, so I'm not sure how involved Hayes is with the actual editing. They do mention what it's called at the end of most of the books, like, and by the end, I mean like post-epilogue,
Yeah.
wrap-up stuff. But they do some great work, absolutely worth checking out for sure. Let's see, did our chat have any good side pieces? Um, Obvious Drake also in on DCC. That's right. Hell yeah. And I'm not sure what. Talented narrator. Jeff Hayes is now up there with Nick Podell, uh, Michael Kramer, and Kate Reading. All right, good to know to keep out an eye for those names. Always appreciate the shout outs to the people who lend their talents to making audiobooks come to life.
Yeah. Yeah, Podell and Kramer are on my short list of um, fantastic narrators as well. Sorry, Kate, you didn't make it, but
Yeah, the only I think the other one that I would add to that, if you haven't listened to Andy Serkis reading the Silmarillion, another that was my favorite audiobook reading until Dungeon Crawler Carl. So shout out to
good to
Andy
know. Good to
Serkis.
know. Shout out to Sound Booth Theater. Deem's Table
That's the one.
says that is who Jeff Hayes works with, and
Thank
that
you.
does sound familiar now that he says it. So,
Oh yeah, I knew it was something like along those lines, but I knew I would have butchered it trying, and I never would have come up with that specifically. But thank you, Alan, for letting us know. All right. I think that wraps it up then for today. Just remember, start thinking about your favorite books for the year and let us know. And maybe it'll wind up on our vote for January. But other than
yeah,
that, thanks for joining us, everybody. It's a fun discussion. We're looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks. So until then, see you next book.
yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us, and see you next book.